Hello, Champion Patriots. John Lemme here, the founder of Conservative Business Journal and a host of the CBJ Keyword Real News Podcast Show. And I'm excited to bring to you for our second episode, three-star General Michael Flynn. Michael Flynn is a great personal friend of ours. And as you know, he's a Lieutenant General, U.S. Army retired, former National Security Advisor to the 45th President of the United States. And you talk about timing, General Flynn, we have a little issue that's occurring right now in Eastern Europe. And you wrote an incredible letter kind of giving us really, this is the state of the union. You know, you talk about the timeliness of your show here. And what I want to do, General Flynn, I want to unpack a few statements about the letter you wrote, and then kind of share with everyone, you know, from your perspective, obviously the decades in military experience, and you saw the situation occur, and then you wrote this letter and published it. And like you said, the invasion was totally avoidable.
Yeah. Yeah, John. So first of all, thanks for having me back on. It's I know we always juggle around schedules and stuff, but boy, we couldn't have more perfect timing than this show right now because of everything going on in Eastern Europe, all the things happening in our own country domestically. You know, that's just the challenges extraordinary challenges we're facing, and of course the State of the Union speech by Biden this evening, which should be. I don't know what to expect. I'm assuming he's gotten a lot of rest over the last couple of days, despite the world being on fire. One thing that I would say to you, John, and you guys are, you guys and Christy is great. You have an extraordinary audience, and your audience, I know, has grown because of your authenticity, your honesty, and your ability to really just kind of get the truth across. I mean, it's like, you discover things, you find things out, and then you report on them. And I think that is exactly what we need, particularly as we were talking earlier. We have these independent broadcasters out there that are not beholden to anybody. So you're able to really, charge out there, pointing into the spear of journalism and reporting and just be honest about everything. And I think that that's something that we just lack in this country right now. So I'm so really honored to be speaking to you and to your audience about some of these, extraordinary times, these historic times that we are in. So I appreciate you bringing up the statement. If you can, post it. Sure. People can also find it at generalflynn.com, but post it and let your readers read through it. And they can judge it for themselves.
Yeah, but you guys will see. Obviously, for those of you watching the replay, we published an article on the Conservative Business Journal with the video replay of General Flynn, along with the audio replay of General Flynn. It's on all the podcast platforms. We're now ranked in the top 0.01%. I'm very humbled by that, of the podcast platforms, of the 2.7 million podcasts out there. So we've been consistent for years and years and years. So tell everyone, General Flynn, when you woke up that morning and you heard the story that Putin made a decision to begin the invasion of Ukraine, with your experience in the military, your experience in the European bloc of countries, Putin, Russia, everything with Ukraine, kind of give everyone your personal expertise and what they can do and what you believe is really going to happen out of this.
Well, leading up to the recent decision where Russia has invaded Ukraine, and now we have this, this back and forth ongoing. And I know that there's some talks going on in, I believe it's Belarus, but leading up to that, and I mean for probably the better part of a month, I could just feel the mistakes. I could see the mistakes. I could hear the mistakes and all the different rhetoric that was coming out of particularly Washington, D.C. This what we call failed, it's failed diplomacy, right? War results from failed diplomacy. War is an extension of failed politics. So at least a month prior, and I'm in back and forth with different people that I know that are, that are also very expert in these areas, and we're analyzing what's happening, and we're talking to each other, and we're like, God, if they just would only understand the following issues. Like most people and your listeners, some may know, some may not know, that at the end of the Cold War, there was a meeting between Mitterrand out of France, Thatcher out of the United Kingdom, President Bush, who was the father, the senior, right, at the time, the president, and Gorbachev. And there was a decision made about no more encroachment up against the Russian Federation by NATO, and there was an agreement to that. And we've been in violation of that agreement for a long time. And it's and the other thing that's happening, because I was listening to a very good friend of mine who does her own little thing and put out a really great statement about the Ukraine. And her name is Molly McCann, for anybody that follows Molly on Instagram. And if I say, like in my statement, and I want people to read it, I say things in there that this is avoidable, that there are interests that President Putin has, and there are interests that Europe has. But because I wrote an article about a month and a half ago about this whole situation. It was published in the Western Journal, and it had to do with a comparison between what's happening in Eastern Europe, and it had to do with nuclear weapons. Okay, what's happening in Eastern Europe, and I compared it to the Cuban Missile Crisis during the era of John F. Kennedy. So, because there are some similarities in terms of philosophy, strategy, history that we've got to understand. I don't know if people know, but over this past weekend, Russia put its nuclear forces on the highest levels of alert. I mean, this is nuts. This is crazy stuff, because we have failed in our diplomatic efforts, and we have chosen, and I personally, so I'm just speaking, my judgment and what I see, I actually think that there is a war. In fact, I know there's a war machine when we talk about neocons that want to see the United States of America engaged in another war, and everybody thinks that they can keep war limited, right? Limited. I even mentioned that in my statement there, John, that I talk about. Yep. Maybe let's hope that this is a limited war, meaning that have limited objectives, and they only take, it only sees half of Ukraine. But typically, war, there's mistakes, and there are big mistakes, and when big mistakes are made, it's no longer limited objectives. And when I saw Putin recently make the decision to put his nuclear forces on high alert, that's not a small decision, not a small decision. So clearly avoidable. We have rookies that are running our foreign policy in this country. They listen far too often to the neocons in the defense think tanks in Washington, D.C., and we are where we are. And so I'm very interested to hear what Biden has to say tonight about all of this. The tragedy of everything, and this is where I'm going to say, because I'll be described as a conspiracy theorist, all right? So I'm going to say America first. What is the matter with having an American first mindset? I want to take care of this country first, John. We have an invasion going on our southern border, upwards of about 3 million people this year from 151 countries. It's an invasion. Talk about invasions.
That's right.
And we have rising drug problems. I mean, I talked to somebody last night. I was with some folks, and one of them was from up in the north, and they were telling me about the number one problem in their state is the drug overdoses from the fentanyl. I mean, so it's all these things, and I'm going on and on here, John. But I want your listeners to understand that we are not ready. I'm going to tell you, we are not ready for a war in Europe. We're not. And I, as a military guy, former senior leader, when I look at 20 years of failure of in the war on terror, we killed a lot of bad guys. We captured a lot. A lot of those guys have been released now, certainly under different administrations. But look at what the outcome of Afghanistan was. I mean, we've surrendered. We surrendered in Afghanistan, and we turned it over to our enemy, and we turned it over to them with whatever $80-90 billion worth of equipment. Some of that equipment is probably finding its way now into this situation in Eastern Europe.
Yeah,
certainly,
sure it has.
Other parts.
Something, General. General Flynn, I think it really, as I was sharing on my show that last couple of days, I believe the greatest American politicians was the Canadian truckers, because they actually took action. And then you have the Ukrainian people that are actually saying, you know what, we have 8 years of sovereignty here. We're not backing down quickly. What do you want to share to our listeners, General Flynn, about just the fire and the love for their country? I wish more Americans would take off their masks, stop the games with all the COVID junk, the mandates, and have that Ukrainian protection. Because basically, they're saying Ukrainian first. I mean, Zelensky, you talk about leadership. I mean, he's putting himself out there like you got to kill me, basically. I mean, what do you want to say to all the listeners on the Conservative Business Journal and our CBJ Real News podcast show, General Flynn, about them individually taking the fight? That, I mean,
well, first of all, listen to this type of broadcast. Listen to people like you and some of the guests you have on, and follow you, because I think that you do try to continue to report what is true, because it's very, very difficult to understand the truth as it's playing out on a battlefield. And the people that are closest to the problem, meaning those that are engaged in war, those that are engaged in combat, are probably going to be where the best truth is going to come from, because it's hard to lie, about somebody shooting at you, trying to kill you. So I think that this idea that the Ukrainian people are saying, look, we want, we know we're not a democracy. They're not. Ukraine's not a democracy. We love our freedom. We want our independence, and we want to be able to decide what our future is going to be. We don't want to be under the thumb again of communism, or frankly the regime of Russia and Putin. We don't want that. And like I said, that's why I think that this was avoidable, and it's a tragedy for the people of Ukraine. The Canadian truckers, our own American truckers, our own American convoy. That I saw a thing this morning where the latest one out, I think they left out of St. Louis. They're heading towards the Washington D.C. area. It's 30 miles long, and so these are people that are taking action for their own freedom, to promote freedom. And it's not only for the here and now. The Canadians, I think, really resonated this, but from what I've heard from some of these truckers in the American convoy, it is about our children and our grandchildren and the future of this country. And I think that those people in Ukraine that are fighting back and that are trying to stand against this invasion by Russia, they're fighting for not only themselves and their own personal freedoms, but they're fighting for, a destiny that should choose freedom over tyranny, because that is the enemy of freedom is tyranny. And that's what we are up against. We're up against that in Eastern Europe. We're up against that right here at home. And they're definitely up against that in Canada, as we saw Trudeau essentially call for martial law and a crushing of these peaceful protesters. And it wasn't really just about mask mandates. It wasn't about COVID. It was about personal choice and freedom. And that's what the truckers convoy is here in this country. It's about personal choice and freedom, allowing Americans to make their own decisions, allowing Ukrainians to make their own decisions, and to do it in a way that, that's smart, historically, culturally, geographically, and then understanding the situation and the neighborhood, right? If you understand your neighborhood, then you can make the right decisions, but you have to understand those conditions. And our government right now, I just feel like they're flailing. And I think what we're going to hear tonight, is I think it's going to be something that's going to be like, we're in charge, we're in control, we've got to keep these. I mean, it's going to be doubling, tripling down on what it is that we're facing. And that's not what the American people want.
That's it. Just interject for a second, General Flynn. You talk about weak leadership. I mean, tonight, when Nancy Pelosi ripped up President Trump's State of the Union address, they should rip up Biden's State of the Union address before he even goes up there and say, let's just take a chalkboard out and write it down. Look at the results in every aspect: the tsunami of illegal aliens, the supply chain, the law and order, I mean, you can't write a screenplay now to just the debacle that's going on in this country. And that's why, as we say in the Constitution, we the people, we the people.
Exactly.
I mean,
we the people that's right.
It's so important. So another question for you, and this is something I've been hammering. Putin doesn't fear anybody right now. We have the weakest leadership in America's history. My dad will be watching it. My dad's in a show live now watching it. He's 92 years young. He's a vet. And he said to me the other day, we actually celebrated his 92nd birthday. He goes, I've never been in America with such a weak, embarrassing leadership, that there's no leader. I mean, that's Putin Putin has no fear right now, because who's going to stop him? So that statement we couldn't say if we were on paid media. We're independent. We appreciate all of our supporters and sponsors and so forth that obviously that makes everything happen here at the CBJ Real News podcast show. But General Flynn, talk about that weak leadership, and then tied into, and I said this on a show, it was 3 days after he took office. I did a video. I did a show. I said he shut down the Keystone Pipeline to pump the money into Russia to fund the war that's going to happen in 2 years.
Yeah.
And I have the videos going viral now that I actually made, because when you shut down Keystone Pipeline, Austin, we're buying more oil and gas from Russia than ever before, which fuels the war machine. So I know that.
Yeah. So
that's
again, stick that statement on your website, because I want people to read it, because I say that. I talk about the Keystone Pipeline, the day one shutdown. We're buying energy. We're buying energy, John, from Russia.
That's crazy.
They didn't sanction the Nord Stream pipeline, which flows from Russia directly into Germany, and then Germany then takes that and flows it all the way out to the rest of Europe and, frankly, other parts of the world. That's why the Italians are balking on doing a lot. I mean, that's why NATO's response is like, it's like the U.S. leadership. So the blinding flash of the obvious that you just stated is weak leadership here at home, and everybody in this country knows it. Even the people that are quote unquote supporting this administration, they know there's nobody home. It's like, knock knock, nobody's answering the door, and so we are in a really, really difficult place. One thing that we have not mentioned yet is China. Okay, right. So who's the big winner here, and who is nobody talking about? And I want to talk about this for about a minute here, John, on your show. Yeah. Nobody's talking about China. China's almost getting a pass, and what is actually happening is this effort by Russia, and trust me, the communists, they're kind of a weird ideological breed, if you will, but they have an alignment. So they have an alignment globally and strategically that is against our way of life. So trust me that when I say this, that China and Russia have had military and economic arrangements and deals with each other for the last 10 years that if you're not paying attention, you don't even know about them, but they have them. And so there's an alignment between these two. And of course, nobody is talking about China. Nobody in our administration is talking about China. It's going to be hard pressed to even find, I think, I'd like to see if Biden mentions China tonight in a negative way, like we've got to stand up strong to these people. We cannot allow these nations, these communist nations, to overtake our way of life, because that's exactly what they're going to do. He doesn't have the leadership skills to be able to do that. Now I'm talking about President Biden. So everybody knows that we have weak leadership. Whenever we've had weak leadership in the White House, and this is by far the weakest in my lifetime. And I worked from the late 70s all the way until I retired from the military, and then went to work for Trump as the president. I've worked for many, many presidents since the late 70s. So I know, sure. And I study these people, and I study leadership. I study our own American history. I study world history. I mean, warfare is about understanding, the adversaries and understanding the leaders that have come over the decades and centuries of history. So you understand the warfare that you are in and what you're up against. This country right now, we are in a state of war in the United States of America. And when we think about Eastern Europe, I still have not heard, and maybe he'll talk about it, still have not heard what are our national security interests in that part of the world. And I see very, very few, if any, that should drag us into that. And number two, we have such urgent national security needs in this country right now, and those needs are going to require leadership. But I'm telling you, John, and I'm telling your listeners, and I wish I could get right into the rooms with your listeners face to face. We have an administration that's in power in this country right now that isn't about to wake up tomorrow morning, John, and say, you know what, we've been lying to you about COVID, we've been lying to you about the illegal invasion, we've been lying to you about inflation, we've been lying to you about Europe, we've been lying to you about the election fraud, we've been lying to you about everything. And so we're going to start to be better. We're going to start to lead the nation out of this rut, out of this abyss that we find ourselves in. They're not. They're going to double down. They're going to triple down. And they're going to continue to come after people like me. They're going to continue to try to shut you down and censor you and cancel us, subpoena me to get me off this horse that I'm on. And it ain't a high horse. I mean, I'm riding this thing because I feel so anxious, frankly, to use a word that I used last night about our country. Our country is at risk. We are in a time of crisis. I think that the phrase that I like to use is local action has a national impact.
That's right.
So you got to get involved in your local communities. One of the things that I want, one of the solutions, and this is one of many, and I'll get off my soapbox here.
Sure.
I want the primaries. I want the primaries that have already begun, and they're going to run through about August, depending on which state you're from. I want the primaries in this country to be the largest turnout in the history of primaries ever in our elections, ever, because less than 30% of people in this country who are capable and registered to vote in primaries. Less than 30%, people. So get your friends and family and neighbors and whomever else out there, tell your networks, get out there and vote in the primaries, because by the time the general election comes and we still have the same old establishment people, the same old establishment politicians who have gotten us into this problem, it's our fault, because that's all we have left is the establishment to vote for. And maybe this next election won't be stolen, but we have to get in there. I now say we have to vote or vote plus. Get involved in there, vote, but also pay attention, become a volunteer, get involved in the precinct stuff, but vote in the primaries. Let's make this primary the largest turnout in the history of this nation. I'm telling you, people, if we don't get involved in Civics 101 here, folks, and that means everybody is involved in politics now. Nobody can stand here and go, I don't do that political stuff. That's for the politicians. That's exactly why we are where we are, John. So,
that's right.
Thank you for having me on. And I want to thank your audience for continuing to get the word out about the type of show that you offer, which is authentic, honest, and at times it can be brutally honest, but that's exactly what we need right now in our voices.
That's what we need to. And even as I'm listening to you, I wrote down the situation about the primaries. I say, General Flynn, that our number one asset we have as an American is our vote. My whole family came from Italy, and you remember you saw me speak that time, and I showed all of I have the legal immigration papers here that came from Italy in 1913, legal immigration that came in to add value to America. And the most important asset we have is a vote as a citizen to have some in service, the public servant. So it's so important. And just real quick, everyone, make sure you guys follow us on Telegram, Rumble, and Cloud Hub, which Cloud Hub, there's no censorship. You guys follow us at our channel at CBJ Real News, CBJ Real News, Telegram, Rumble, and Cloud Hub, and obviously visit our main website, conservativebusinessjournal.com. We have 22 contributors now. We publish some of the greatest conservative news. Our podcast is ranked in the top 0.01% of all the podcasts out there because of consistency and because of no holds barred, uncensored. And then our main sponsor of our show, very quickly here, as you guys know, is conservativemarketplace.com. When we were censored, banned, shut down, banned on YouTube at 2 million subscribers, General Flynn, 5,000 videos. I was banned for 15 months now. We lost a multiple 7-figure business between that and the Google ads. So out of that, God gave me a vision called conservativemarketplace.com. We have 150 products now. We're Amazon's worst enemy. We have everything from all of the patriotic products. We have health supplements, all of our books, children's books, men's accessories, artwork. Guys, thank you for supporting and showing your support at conservativemarketplace.com.
And I'm going to push you. I have other people that I run into all the time too, John. I'm going to push you some made in America, really good products. I don't benefit from any of them. I just like them. And I'll send that to you separately, because we need to continue to add to that conservative marketplace. I used to say, and I'll finish. I used to say, we need to stay on, if we can stay on Twitter, because that's that's the battlefield that we're fighting on. Now it's like, get off Twitter, get on some of these other social media platforms.
That.
Dump Twitter. I'm a big fan of Cloud Hub and others that you mentioned, and I'll push you some.
Well, I appreciate. It's interesting
products
too, General Flynn, for people, for everyone. When we got shut down, and you were there, that was at the event with my friend Pressy, who was murdered by the CDC protocol, which you met back in over a year and a half ago now. And we got shut down. I literally said in prayer, I'm like, look, I'm not backing down. I'm going to speak about illegal aliens, communism, abortion, and election fraud. Those are words you can't say in mainstream media. They shut you down. So God gave me a vision at conservativemarketplace.com, which gives everybody wins. I mean, all books are self-published. Everything we promote, most of the businesses are all made in America. So we appreciate that. And, one more final question. And once again, guys, thank you for visiting conservativemarketplace.com. And Taiwan. I'll mention Taiwan, and then I'll let you go, General Flynn. How Taiwan, when we mention that word, what goes through your mind about China and Taiwan? Because China's moving closer to Taiwan with Putin's zero fear now.
China has every intention of making Taiwan part of China. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. If I were in Taiwan, I'd be very afraid. I'd be very concerned about the lack of American leadership to basically do the right thing if the time came. The Chinese tactically are conducting overflights and such, and they're violating the what they call the air engagement zone, which is a military term, essentially. And they are constantly doing that. So I'd be very concerned. And frankly, if China decided to invade Taiwan, I actually think that would be the end of Taiwan as a free state, free nation. And I'm not sure we would do anything about it other than a lot of rhetoric. And you see a lot of the pundits on a lot of the fake news media talking about how we got to be stronger. We got to do this. But Taiwan right now, China right now is getting a pass. Nobody's talking about, when you hear, I go to some of the enemy networks sometimes, and I call them the enemy networks or the fake news networks. I go to some of the fake news networks just to hear what they're talking about. And nobody's talking about China.
That's right.
China's getting a pass. And there is a good reason for China getting a new pass or getting a pass, because this administration is they're empowered by them. So never mind. I mean, the Biden family, right? I mean, and I mentioned that in that statement as well. I slip in subtly a little bit about a certain laptop, right? So anyway,
that's right.
But we're in a very, very historically difficult and a moment of crisis for the United States of America. And all of Americans, we need to rise above this and get involved in our communities like we've never been involved before. We take this country back one town, one county at a time, and we can do it. We can do it.
That's right. And that's why I tell people, big problem, big opportunity. We have some of the biggest problems, some of the biggest opportunities. And, I'm famous for my world famous sword of David and Goliath. Goliath was a big problem, and it became a big opportunity for David. Right now, we have big problems. And for those of you entrepreneurs and business owners, I talk about making capitalism great again. There's a big problem. Even as you mentioned, China, 95% of the products on conservativemarketplace.com, General Flynn, are made in America from local vendors, local businesses, Amazon's worst enemy. And I want everyone to pay attention. This is why I'm so excited. General Flynn, thank you for your time for a second appearance. Make sure you guys share the episode, get it out everywhere, and patronize our number one sponsor supporter, conservativemarketplace.com. General Flynn, thank you. And you're awesome. And keep fighting like Flynn. Appreciate it.
There you go. Thank you, John. See you. Talk to you later.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
God bless.